So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough. Great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, you know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left. He's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades. And it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. A trade is not fair. He said, I know that, I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left on the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, bang.
Donald Trump has upended decades of U.S. foreign policy by bringing in a vast array of tariffs that threaten to disrupt international trade. Here are some initial key points. Countries across the world are racing to absorb the new way of doing business with the U.S. after Donald Trump unveiled tailored tariffs that look set to ignite a global trade war. Trump has made clear the goals he wants to accomplish through the tariffs: bring manufacturing back to the U.S., respond to unfair trade policies from other countries, increase tax revenue, and incentivize crackdowns on migration and drug trafficking. However, the EU and China have promised countermeasures, while South Korea has vowed an all-out response. The damage done on a political level with allies such as the UK may also carry its own cost as billions are wiped off economic growth. Here are some early points to note in the wake of Wednesday's wide-ranging announcement. 1. Firms are bracing for what liberation means. The U.S. president sold the idea of global tariffs with a celebratory air, making good on his campaign trail promise to liberate the nation from higher prices. The president has claimed prices are way down since his return to office, but anyone who has visited a grocery store in that time might feel differently. And U.S. firms are apprehensive about the wider effect of this move. Higher costs, they warn, will be passed on to their customers. What we have heard from business of all sizes, across all industries, from around the country is that these broad tariffs are a tax increase that will raise prices for American consumers and hurt the economy, said Neil Bradley, Chief Policy Officer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The corporate lobby group. 2. The China link? China has been hit particularly hard by the new tariffs, which take the total levy on Chinese imports to over 50%, as well as struggling nations in Southeast Asia, including war-torn and earthquake-hit Myanmar. One theory being put forward is that countries linked to sizable Chinese investments are being targeted. Dr. Suaj Dharmanagara, a senior fellow at the Iseas Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore, said the Trump administration thinks is that by targeting these countries they can target Chinese investment in countries like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia. By targeting their products, maybe it will affect Chinese exports and the economy, he said. The real target is China, but the real impact on those countries will be quite significant because this investment creates jobs and export revenue. The tariffs comes as many countries in Southeast Asia are already grappling with the fallout from the cuts to USAID, which provides humanitarian assistance to a region vulnerable to natural disasters and support for pro-democracy activists battling repressive regimes. 3. Key trade partners Canada and Mexico are spared, but will still feel the pain. Canada and Mexico have been exempted from the latest round of tariffs, but as Prime Minister Mark Carney and business leaders reminded everyone, 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, as well as on automobiles, came into effect hours after Wednesday's announcement. Carney warned that while Trump had preserved key elements of the bilateral relationship, the global tariffs announced earlier in the day fundamentally changed the international trading system. The two countries have been hit by previously declared 25% tariffs on many goods over border control and fentanyl trafficking issues, the White House said in a fact sheet. Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Wednesday that her country would not pursue a tit-for-tat on tariffs, but would rather announce a comprehensive program on Thursday. 4. This is a big gamble. Trump himself appears prepared for the announcement to spark a lot of turbulence in markets across the world, saying recently, there is a period of transition. Because what we're doing is very big. The universal tariffs come into effect on the 5th of April, and the reciprocal ones on the 9th of April. So countries around the world now have a very short space of time in which to choose their path. Some may try to cut a deal with Trump. Others may respond with retaliatory tariffs. But a continuing theme will be uncertainty. 5. Absolutely nowhere is immune. Heard Island and McDonald Islands are some of the most remote places on Earth, inhabited only by an array of wildlife. Yet they are among the external territories of Australia listed separately for a 10% tariff. Norfolk Island, which lies just off Australia's east coast, was slugged with a tariff of 29%, or 19 percentage points higher than the rest of Australia, prompting Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to say on Thursday, I'm not quite sure that Norfolk Island, with respect to it, is a trade competitor with the giant economy of the United States, but that just shows and exemplifies the fact that nowhere on Earth is safe from this. The world's most powerful man is using his office to punish journalistic organizations that won't follow his orders or who report critically on his policies. Donald Trump's actions against the press include bans, lawsuits, and handpicking his own pool of reporters. But the global threat against the press is bigger than just Trump. Economic and authoritarian forces around the globe are challenging journalists' ability to report. An independent press, one that those in power can't simply overrule, is crucial to democracy. Figures such as Trump and Hungary's Viktor Orban want to crush it through exclusion and influence. The Guardian is a global news organization that will stand up to attacks on the free press. We have no interest serving those with immense power or immense wealth. We are owned by an independent trust devoted only to protecting and defending our journalism. That means we don't have a billionaire owner dictating what our reporters can cover, or what opinions our columnists can have, or shareholders demanding a quick return. The global situation is shifting hour by hour, making this an extremely challenging moment. It will take brave, well-funded, committed, quality journalism to call out what is happening. Our job is to make sure we do not get overwhelmed as Trump floods the zone. We must focus on the stories that will make the biggest impact on people's lives while holding the powerful to account. We'll also continue to focus on the ideas people need to create a better world, a reason for hope. As the writer and Guardian columnist Rebecca Solnit says, authentic hope requires clarity and imagination. The Guardian can provide both, and with the help of readers like you in Vietnam, we can drive hope by reporting truthfully on what is happening and never pulling our punches. A lot is at stake. Stock futures plunged as investors digest Trump's tariffs. U.S. stocks plunged in after-hours trading Wednesday as investors digested President Donald Trump's decision to impose sweeping tariffs that could escalate a growing trade war and upend the global economy. Dow futures plummeted more than 1,100 points, or to 0.7%. S&P 500 futures sank 3.9%. Futures tied to the NASDAQ 100 plunged for 0.7%. U.S. stocks had closed higher Wednesday afternoon ahead of Trump's announcement on tariffs, but a sell-off began as he unveiled his plan, holding up a chart that depicted how rates would increase for each country. Key Asian stocks mostly sank shortly after opening on Thursday, hours after the broad-based tariffs were announced. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 index tumbled at least 4%. South Korea's Kospi plunged to 0.7%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng index slid to 0.4%. Taiwan's TAIEX was closed for a holiday. Wall Street had been nervous about Trump's tariffs, though some analysts expected stocks could rally if the tariff announcement was lighter than feared. Those hopes were quickly dashed as Trump unveiled baseline 10% tariffs on all imports, plus higher rates for specific countries. Trump is enacting a very aggressive tariff policy, far more aggressive than most investors thought possible 6 months ago, said Jedil Lerbrook, portfolio manager at Argent Capital. Painful times for stock market investors. While the market was positioned to bounce on a less bad than expected tariff announcement, there is no way to spin today's news as positive for the economy or stock market, said Lerbrook. Apple, Tesla tumble in after-hours trading. The sell-off turned into a rout Wednesday evening as investors reckoned with the extent of Trump's tariffs. Apple APL tumbled more than 7% in after-hours trading. The tech giant relies extensively on supply chains in China, which will be subject to steep tariffs. The other stocks leading markets lower in after-hours trading included Tesla TSLA, which fell more than 6%, and Amazon AMZN, which fell more than 5%. Nike and KE plunged 7%, and Walmart WMT fell 6%. President Trump just finished his tariff speech at the White House, and we would characterize this slate of tariffs as worse than the worst-case scenario the street was fearing, said Dan Ives, senior analyst at Wedbush Securities, in a note. I've said the jaw-dropper was Trump slamming hefty reciprocal tariffs on China, bringing its rate to 54%. As stocks tanked, members of the Trump administration appeared unfazed. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Bloomberg that a sell-off in stocks was a Mag 7 problem, not a MAGA problem, referring to the Magnificent Seven of tech stocks that include Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, and Nvidia. Economists expect that Trump's sweeping tariffs could upend global supply chains, stoke inflation, and drag on economic growth. Joe Bianco, chief investment strategist at Bond Blocks, said the U.S. will continue to experience elevated uncertainty and market volatility as investors assess the detrimental economic impact of Trump's tariffs. The roller coaster ride continues as the initial leaks were positive, but then the details were released and they were far worse than expected, said Chris Zaccarelli, chief investment officer at Northlight Asset Management. The silver lining for investors could be that this is only a starting point for negotiations with other countries, and ultimately tariff rates will come down across the board. But for now, traders are shooting first and asking questions later, said Zaccarelli. What about you? What do you think about the issue we raised above? Please comment and let us know. Thank you for listening. God bless you. See you in the next video.